morning, everyone. It is Friday, October 18th, 2019, and you are tuning into the FSWR Review Series edition of the Five Starr Wrestling YouTube channel. If you're checking out this show for the first time, welcome. This is the wrestling YouTube show dedicated to bringing you the most of wrestling news reports and opinions, show recaps, and major events in the wrestling business. We have 2 uploads every week on this channel. Our Monday edition is the news report, where we target some of the major headlines in the wrestling market, as well as weekend shows and pay-per-view events. And our Friday edition is the review series, where we now recap NWA Power, NXT, and AEW Dynamite. That's right, I am scrapping MLW from the report and replacing it with a much better professional wrestling program. So if you like that idea, if you're down with it, make sure you subscribe, make sure you share any feedback you have regarding these programs this week, and make sure you give this video a rating if you don't mind. So with that out of the way, we've got 3 big shows to talk about here, so let us get into it. NWA Power, Episode 2, entitled Clickbait. I will get my early criticism out of the way first. Whoever gave the green light to air reactions from the Wrestling Days needs to be immediately fired. Easily the most cringeworthy thing I've seen in wrestling all this week. Not even close. The show opens with the return of Aron Stevens, aka the former Damian Sandow. And damn, was it good to see Aron back in the wrestling business. I thought he was always criminally misutilized, both when he was in WWE and in TNA. I do not think that we should neglect the fact that it wasn't that long ago that this guy was one of the hottest talents in the pro wrestling business. And no, I am not just talking WWE. I'm talking the entire business, period. Basically talked here about leaving professional wrestling to pursue his acting career. He says that when he heard that NWA Studio Wrestling and professional wrestling was back, he knew that it was the right time to come back to the business. He then informs David Marquez and the fans that going forward, he would like for all of them to avoid making eye contact with him. And then he explains that in this business, there are stars and there are supporting roles. And going forward, he will inform everyone as to when he needs a supporting role. So it looks as if Aron will soon be partaking in the role of Miz, while he presumably looks for his own supporting Ms. Dow. Can't wait. Anyway, I don't want this to seem like I'm just blowing off the whole promo. I did like the promo, although if I had one critique about it, it was very hard to determine whether or not he was trying to establish himself as a face or a heel. I mean, he started off cutting a babyface promo about being amped to come back to NWA, but by the end, he was bringing out a lot more of his heel mannerisms. So I really wasn't sure what to make of that. Plus, the fans were sort of split 50-50 on him, too, so it sounded like they were just as confused as I was. Trevor Murdoch versus Ricky Starks. They had a very basic enhancement match here. Starks got bullied around for a little bit until he made a big comeback at the end. Murdoch tried for a clothesline off the ropes, but Starks caught him in the crucifix for the 3 count. Nothing else to really say about it. I never really got Trevor Murdoch. I know Jim Cornette likes him a lot. I never really saw what was so great about him, but he definitely fits the mold of the talent NWA was going for with this studio show. So as an enhancement talent, I think he's got a place here. There's actually a really great line from Jim in the skit where he refers to Trevor as, and I quote here, a baked potato with arms and legs. And upon second review, I can confirm that this is true. Anyway, Starks cut a promo after the match, talk about how he could challenge for the national or world heavyweight title in NWA, but he is more focused right now on taking himself to a whole new level. Claims that men call him Absolute Ricky Starks, but the women call him Stroke Daddy. Spends a minute putting over his hands himself before admonishing everyone for not being as gifted as him. And then he concludes by saying that people might judge him for being a little funny, but at the end of the day, Ricky's the one counting everyone's money. So I thought this promo was great. He's definitely got a bit of rock in his delivery, but hey, that's cool. If you're going to try and imitate someone, you may as well work from the best. I have never heard of Ricky Starks prior to this match and or promo, so good on him for making a first great impression. And I hope they take advantage of him here, because companies like AEW or WWE swallow this guy up, he'll get lost in the shuffle immediately. Saul Renaro and Jordan Kingsley versus Colt Cabana and Mr. Anderson. Cabana did an interview before the match with Joe Galli. He said that James Storm beat him for the NWA national title when he was not 100%. Said he's gunning for any championship in NWA, including the tag championships. He said that he's got a partner waiting in the wings, and that is when we got the return of Mr. Anderson. Said that he could come out and talk about why he joined the National Wrestling Alliance, but the truth is that everyone knows why Anderson joined the company. No, Anderson, I still have no idea why you joined the National Wrestling Alliance. Anyway, they had a relatively short tag match here. It was inoffensive, shall we say. Anderson looks like he has not hit the treadmill in about 6 months. Cabana did every Colt Cabana match you have ever seen. I know Jim's not a fan of it, and you could definitely tell that he was biting his tongue during a lot of this match. Anderson ended up giving Renaro and Kingsley rolling DVD sentons on each other. Colt hit a turnbuckle clothesline, followed by an Anderson mic check for the 3. Like I said, match was what it was. I could go either way with Colt and Ken. They're definitely not bad talents by any stretch, but they're also characters that just really haven't evolved in the business over time, particularly Anderson. And he's been the same character since his debut in 2005. And while the gimmick does still get a reaction out of people, it always felt tiresome to me, even by the time he got to TNA. And, here he is in 2019, he's doing the same shtick, and now it just looks like he's packed on a few hamburgers and wrinkles into the fold. And Colt's, well, he's Colt, that's all you can really say about him. We had a short Nick Aldis skit where he basically followed up on his sit-down interview with Joe Galli that we had still not seen yet. Said that he didn't like the line of questioning, he's sick of being around a TMZ environment. Said that this is professional wrestling, and he just wants to put the whole deal with him and Camille to bed and go back to representing NWA as the world's champion. We then had a comedy commercial for Tony Fox waffles and tire irons. Because, you see, everyone, when you are born in Paducah, Kentucky, of all places, the only things that you have a grave appreciation for are waffles and tire irons. And I guess it should be noted that everything made in the store is gluten-free and organic. I presume he means the waffles. Although I guess he could be talking about tire irons, who really knows. Anyway, the skit was fantastic, everyone. It was the greatest 60 seconds of my entire life, no question. Until I actually Googled Tony Fox waffles and tire irons in Paducah, Kentucky. And, well, the store doesn't exist. Bummer. Perhaps this was the clickbait that NWA was going for when they were titling the show this week. Kyle Davis conducted an interview with Eddie Kingston in Homicide. Actually, it would be more accurate to say that Kyle interviewed Eddie while Homicide stood there doing literally nothing. And it would also be accurate to say that Eddie Kingston is a great promo, and I cannot even begin to fathom how this man has never found himself wrestling in a major organization at any point. I don't recall a single word that was mentioned in this skit, but I do know that Eddie spoke with such conviction and such passion that I determined it didn't matter what Eddie said, because I still believed every word that came out of his mouth. Ashleigh Vox versus Alison Kaye. Not a whole lot to say about this, if I'm being honest. The story here was that Alison picked Ashleigh as her opponent. Why she was able to do this, I don't really know. It was never explained. Still, they had a perfectly fine little match. Went back and forth. Alison won with some kind of modified straitjacket neckbreaker. And then she did a promo afterwards, putting over Ashleigh and saying that NWA's women's division is in good hands. And I might have believed her promo if I were to imagine that they would pick up any more legitimate female talent at any point, be it girls like Eva Lise or cheerleader Melissa or Mercedes Martinez, for example. The problem, though, is that with WWE and AEW grabbing hold of some of the best female talent on the market, it's definitely going to be an uphill climb for NWA's women's division to compete with WWE and AEW. Although, judging from the women's matches on Dynamite the last couple weeks, maybe NWA is not too far back competitively. We had James Storm coming out for an interview with Joe Galli. He told Galli to never refer to him as champ. He explains that the national title is a prop to get him back to the world title hunt. Says that he's here to be the NWA World's Heavyweight Champion because he's a man. And as he's about to say that he's going to plow through anyone that gets in his way, Eli Drake comes out for a confrontation. He basically gives Storm a reality check and says he shouldn't discount the progress he's made to become the national champion. Says that maybe Nick Aldis is ducking them to avoid defending his title, but he says that Storm is next in line for a title shot and he should not waste his next move. And I won't say that I didn't like the promo. I mean, it definitely got what they were going for, but it just felt really odd for them to sit there and basically diminish the meaning of their mid-card title to put over the world title. And they called it a prop, for God's sake. And obviously, we know that the world title is more prestigious than the mid-card title, but the way the whole thing was set up, it looked like it was designed for us to not care about Storm as the national champion, which, if that's the case, then why doesn't he just relinquish it? The other thing, too, I didn't understand about this promo is why they were in such a hurry to start turning Storm heel. I mean, last week they put him over as a massive babyface by beating up that Josephus guy. And this week he's out there rambling about the show being filled with a bunch of boys and how the national title's a prop to get him closer to the world title. And it's like, I don't know. I guess I just wasn't expecting them to dive in headfirst with making Storm more heelish on camera, especially when they were just doing it with no real build-up. I mean, thought they could have waited a while longer. And it was also particularly weird seeing him go up against Eli Drake in this skit, who was acting more like a face. Definitely felt like a character dynamic was off here. I don't know. It was a good promo, but it was just strange. Eddie Kingston and Homicide versus the Wild Cards for the NWA Tag Team titles in the main event. This is a very by-the-books, paint-by-numbers tag match. Babyface team ran wild early on. Heels cut off Homicide and worked over his neck for a bit. Eventually, Eddie got the hot tag and ran wild on everyone. And before they could do a finish, the Dawsons did a run-in and threw out the match. Technically, the one Dawson low-blowed Eddie first, so it probably should have been a DQ finish with the win going to Eddie and Homicide, but whatever. I mean, Christ, I just watched a Hell in a Cell main event a week and a half back with no finish because the babyface champion used a weapon in a no DQ match. So I wasn't offended by this finish. Anyway, the Dawson brothers laid out everyone and tossed the champions out of the ring, so they're probably setting up some kind of three-way program down the road. Either that or some kind of number one contenders match between the Dawsons and Kingston and Homicide. Anyway, they go with it. It's eventful, so I'll see where they go with it. And in the final skit to the show, we get the sit-down interview with Joe Galli, Kamille, and Nick Aldis. Aldis talked about his match with Tim Storm from last week, said Storm's a hard hitter and an authentic man. He says that Storm's definitely not at his peak anymore, but there's no doubt that Storm can hold his head high, knowing that if he never challenges for the world title again, he put in one hell of an effort. Joe asks why Nick uses Kamille as an enforcement policy. Aldis talks about initially losing the title to, and I quote here, an inferior athlete at All In due to outside interference. He says that he used Kamille at the NWA 70th anniversary show as an insurance policy to even the odds and regain his title. And knowing that when people are gunning for you, the best thing to do is play to your strengths. He puts over the fact that aside from neutralizing outside interference, Kamille has not been physically involved with helping Aldis retain his title. And he concludes by saying that Kamille took the position and she does very well with it. Joe asks Kamille to chime in with her thoughts on the matter. And with the gimmick being that she's a mute, Kamille says absolutely nothing. And we are apparently either intended to buy the idea that she is doing this on her own merits, or if Nick is essentially paying her off to keep her mouth shut, which is actually a real intriguing story. And the other thing I like about this too is that they aren't going full-blown Aldis heel mode yet. And he's still got the representative of the NWA brand moniker. He still conducts himself well-mannered. He's very genuine in his delivery of everything. But he uses those small doses and shots to tease the idea that he's turning the corner without being so blunt about it. So I like this slow burn story. I mean, it's definitely refreshing to see something like this take place at this time, build up to something bigger, possibly at that upcoming NWA pay-per-view event. Overall, though, this show was so much better than MLW, people. You have no idea. I mean, there were a couple things that I raised an eyebrow at, but from top to bottom, this show is so much easier to watch than Major League Wrestling. All right, moving along here. AEW Dynamite from October 16th, 2019. So the show was supposed to open with a first-round tag team tournament match with Kaz and Daniels versus the Best Friends. But before SCU could get to the ring, Pentagon and Phoenix jumped them from behind. Pentagon gave Daniels a package pile driver on the ramp. This was followed by a very awkward moment where Phoenix tried to set up Kaz for the package pile driver, but he was also glancing down the ramp, waiting for Scorpio to make his cue. Anyway, Scorpio ended up running down with his street clothes to chase off the heels, and the match ended up being Kaz and Scorpio versus Trent and Chucky. They had a fine tag match, I would say. The heels dominated a lot of the action early on and worked over Kaz's back. Scorpio ended up getting a hot tag and doing all kinds of dives to the faces. He ended up doing an angle where he chucked his shoe into the crowd, only for it to get immediately thrown back. So I guess someone in the crowd didn't like Scorpio's Sky. Either that or the shoe smelled horrible and he or she wanted to get rid of it. I don't really know. Anyway, like I said, match was going fine. Wasn't great, but it was okay. Then they completely screwed up the finish with that powerbomb / attempted dropkick combo. They didn't even bother to call an audible and try something else to cover up for it. Everyone in the crowd booed this finish. With that all said, the right team went over. I don't think a lot of people were expecting Chucky and Trent to win, especially with the story they're developing right now with the Lucha Brothers and SoCal. So, decent match with good story progression. I guess the one thing I'm still wondering is, what was the whole point of the Phoenix and Pentagon beatdown? I mean, the only way it factored into the match was having Scorpio replace Daniels as the partner, but they still won the match clean, and Phoenix and Pentagon made absolutely no effort to do a second run-in. Maybe if they tried to run in a second time only to get thwarted by Jungle Boy and Marco Stunt, the first beatdown might have made more sense. But instead, they just shot an angle with the Lucha Bros and SoCal uncensored just because they wanted to take Daniels out of the match, I guess. I mean, maybe the story is that Scorpio will end up wrestling the rest of the tournament while Daniels sells the injury. And if that's what the plan is, I guess it's fine. I mean, I could see them going as far as having Kaz and Scorpio win the belts and do some kind of long-term angle where Daniels gets bitter and jealous about Scorpio holding one half of the titles. That could work. Although I wouldn't want to see them blow that feud off in the first 12 months of AEW television programming. You save that for a big event in a year or so, then you got me hooked. Santana and Ortiz versus John Silver and Alex Reynolds. I recognize the names of the jobbers in this match. I think Silver's worked some PWG and New England shows before. Alex Reynolds, I'm not all that familiar with. Anyway, LAX basically killed them with the powerbomb neckbreaker combo for the finish. Same finish as the Dark Order, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe they want to change that. Anyway, Jericho showed up on the big screen afterwards and put over the Inner Circle. Didn't really note any of the verbiage aside from the fact that I guess Jericho wants the Young Bucks versus LAX at Full Gear or something. I don't know. It was really weird. He put over that LAX wants a match with the best tag team in the league, but why they had Jericho be the guy to issue the challenge, I don't really know. Anyway, the segment was fine. There was a complete turn the channel heat moment during Jericho's promo where I couldn't hear a damn word he was saying because Ortiz was still on the rampway screaming the best to the top of his lungs. Just completely drowned out Jericho's promo. That part sucked. They had a Cody video package to hype up his match with Jericho at Full Gear. This is a great video. They basically told the story that Cody is on a whole different level of focus right now as he looks to capture the world title. They had DDP and MJF and Brandy in there putting him over. There was some great dialogue from Jim Ross where he actually put over the idea that while he is rallying behind Cody, he also acknowledges that Cody's got a whole lot on his plate right now, both as a wrestler and as a business owner. He's trying to run day-to-day operations of AEW. And while Cody's trying to balance like 80 different things all at once, Jericho's one focus is on defending his world title against Cody at the pay-per-view. And so there's this idea planted that Cody's brains are a little scrambled right now as he tries to find a way to balance wrestling with the business aspect of things. So I really like this. I don't think anyone in the world expects Cody to beat Jericho at the pay-per-view, nor should he. But as far as babyface hype goes and getting people to rally behind your challenger, doesn't get much better than what they did here. Britt Baker versus Riho for the AEW Women's World Championship. Question. Britt's hometown is Pittsburgh, correct? That's what Justin Roberts said during the ring intros. AEW is going to be in Pittsburgh next week for Dynamite. So, why did they do a title match this week in Philly? Were they just afraid that the Pittsburgh crowd would cheer Britt and boo Riho? I don't get it. Anyway, the match ended up being good by the end. The finish was really creative, and the people were definitely into the last few minutes of it. So I can't say the match didn't work or that it was terrible, but the first 3 quarters of this match were a completely different story. It was very clunky. Britt and Riho just couldn't get on the same page with anything. You could tell the crowd was starting to turn on it a little bit. And there's a spot literally a minute in where Britt gets completely lost trying to wrestle Riho down with an armbar. So she just kind of rolls on top of her, and it looked really awkward. I kind of joked around last week at the idea that somehow a tag match with Riho and Britt Baker inexplicably led to them squaring off in a singles bout for the title with 1 week of buildup. And I'm still very confused by this. And it also didn't help that the announcers never bothered to explain the circumstance either. You want your product to be taken seriously, right? You want people to buy everything you do as making logical sense, right? Well, I'll tell you right now, one way to rescind that credibility is by doing dumb crap like this, where you announce a random title match between 2 makeshift babyface tag partners just because. How did Britt Baker earn this title shot? What did you do to build up to this match? How does a partnership between Britt and Riho immediately lead to them facing off against one another? You have to explain these things to us if you want us to care about it. You can't just throw this out there cold and expect people to accept it. Well, course, a lot of this is being preached to disgruntled hardcore fans, so who knows? Maybe you can throw this out there cold and people will accept it. But I didn't. Anyway, Riho retained, as she probably should have. And like I said, the people did get into the false finishes, so I would say that the match ended up being passable by the end. I mentioned in the FSWR report that it seems Riho has garnered the attention of the young female demo, probably because she looks no older than 12. So even if I'm still kind of shaking my head at the idea of who they're building their women's division around, I can't deny it's not working. I mean, as long as people like her and as long as she's drawing in viewers to watch your show, by God, stick with her. Push her to the moon. Marco Stunt and Jungle Boy versus the Lucha Bros. Really sucks to hear about the Luchasaurus injury. I mean, I think you could tell a lot of people in the crowd were bummed to hear about that too. And I know they kind of had their hands tied here to find a last-minute replacement, so I'm not going to knock them for their substitution method here. Not like they really had much of a choice. That all said, I'm not a Marco Stunt fan. I just don't get the appeal in watching someone who looks like the female referee could believably kick his teeth down his throat. I won't say that I hated the match, but I've seen a few Marco Stunt matches in AEW so far, and I'm sorry. Doesn't matter who you put this kid in the ring with. It doesn't matter what environment or what kind of match he works. I will never be able to take a Marco Stunt match seriously. This looked very Bush League on TV. Seeing Phoenix and Pentagon have to sell for this kid was beyond incredible. And no, for the record, I do not mean incredible as in awesome or phenomenal. I mean incredible in the literal sense of the definition, as in it's beyond absurd that I'm watching a teenager get in any offense on two guys twice his size, especially when those two guys are authentic badasses, and what's more, they're not even that tall. I cannot fathom a single casual wrestling fan tuning into this program at this point and wanting to stay tuned in. They're probably thinking, why are these two Mexican dudes beating up an 8-year-old on TV while this Mowgli knockoff is standing on the ring apron watching them? That all said, the right team won. I was never going to be a fan of the replacement they put in for this match, but the right team went over, and with Luchasaurus being out with the injury for the time being, I really think that the right team went over here. Pac and Jon Moxley versus Hangman Adam Page and Kenny Omega. If you ever need a model of a tale of two matches, I present to you this match. So they go out there and work the match early on. And they're doing some stuff in the ring. It's not all that exciting. Page gets in this early hot tag to absolute crickets from the crowd. They keep doing more stuff for a few minutes. Crowd is absolutely dead. For the first time during this 3-week AEW versus NXT showcase on Wednesday night, I was legitimately getting antsy watching a match. And for the record, no, not antsy as in excited with all the cool stuff that was going on. Antsy as in, God, can we just end this match and move on before I lose interest in the show altogether? Page takes an incredibly stupid apron bump on his back for the heat. Don't ever do that. And it's like, this match was just kind of there. And there's just really nothing all that exciting happening, and people aren't reacting to it a lot. They come back from commercial, and Omega gets this hot tag for his team. And somehow, all four men were able to completely turn the crowd the other way in this match. Omega's hitting a bunch of Snapdragon suplexes. He does some dives to the outside. Page does a top rope moonsault. They just start firing on all cylinders and having this PWG-style match, and crowd's going crazy for everything. There's this great exchange where Omega and Moxley are doing the stiff shots to each other in the face, like we'd see them in a New Japan match. They eventually do a deal where Omega and Mox bring in a barbed wire broom and bat from under the ring, which I'll admit was very choreographed and stupid. I mean, we're supposed to pretend that it's just convenient that they had the barbed wire broom and bat placed at opposite ends of the ring for a spot in a later tag match. Come on. Again, you want us to take the show seriously. You can't do overly scripted crap like this and expect us to buy it as legit. So anyway, Pac ended up yanking the bat away to prevent Moxley from using it. Moxley flipped him the double bird and gave him a dirty deeds and walked out. And that all led to Page and Omega taking advantage. Page gave Pac the dead eye for the 3. And that also set up Pac versus Omega for next week's show. You see, here is an example of doing something logical in a tag match to set up a singles match with the tag partners for next week's show. Moxley got pissed at Pac for getting in the middle of his confrontation with Omega. Pac's pissed because Moxley cost them the match for their team and essentially helped hand over Pac's first AEW loss. Now they have a reason to fight next week. Good. This makes sense. Darby Allin versus Chris Jericho for the AEW World title in a street fight with rope breaks and countouts, apparently. Don't ask me, I'm just quoting Excalibur. So for all of you that are doing the WCW comparisons with AEW, just know that this WCW comparison is not a good one. There's a point in the match where Jericho puts Darby in a Boston Crab, and after Darby grabs the ropes, the fans begin a chant of, "It's a street fight," because street fights are no DQ with no rope breaks, because we are smart and we know this. Anyway, as far as street fights go, this is pretty tame. They did some stuff with Jericho getting heat on Allin with a kendo stick and some chair shots, but there were definitely no Cracker Barrel clash moments where Darby's getting staple gun in the testicles or falling head over tea kettle through flaming glass, so that I did appreciate. They did a spot toward the end of the match where Jericho tied Darby's hands behind his back. Darby did a bunch of dives and leaps with his hands still bound behind his back. It was at this point that I noted Darby Allin does the Orange Cassidy gimmick better than Orange Cassidy. I will say that I thought the spots where Allin was doing the dives and climbing up the ropes without using his hands did look really awesome. But on general principle, I never really liked the idea of them booking this match to begin with. And I never liked the idea because I don't think they ever did an effective job explaining what Darby Allin did to deserve this title match, besides beating Jimmy Havoc in a random TV match last week. And I also thought it was unbelievably dumb for them to basically just throw this match out there cold without giving any kind of promo build-up as to who the hell Darby Allin is. To this day, I still have no idea who Darby Allin is, what his character represents, or why I should care about him. And I've seen a dozen Darby Allin matches, both in AEW and in other federations too, and I'm still confused by this. I don't even want to imagine how confused casual or new viewers are when they see something like this. I mean, they watch a main event, Chris Jericho defending his world title against this guy, and they're like, why is Jericho wrestling this skateboarder with makeup all over his face? Why am I supposed to care about this? And to be frank, you shouldn't, because they never gave you a rhyme or reason to care about it. And I absolutely hated the finish too. I think it's utterly ridiculous for Jake Hager to have to do a run-in to help Jericho beat Darby Allin of all people. I look at it this way. When you're trying to build up intrigue for title matches, and you're trying to establish prestige behind your top title, you gotta make your champion look strong, be it as a face or a heel. And I'm of the opinion that having a near 30-year ring veteran in Jericho need help to beat an undercard indie no-name like Darby Allin does a huge disservice to your product. And the thing above all else that made absolutely no sense here was that there was no need for them to do the run-in. Darby already had his hands tied behind his back. So you had an easy outing to protect Darby here, but still put Jericho over with his finish. Why not just have Darby go for the coffin drop, but instead of hitting the move, Jericho just winds up and hits a Judas effect out of nowhere for the pin? I mean, at least that way you're putting over your champion and his finisher as a major threat to Cody. But the entire story of this match was that Jericho was milliseconds away from losing his world title in his first defense against an undercard guy whose AEW highlights include taking stupid bumps off of barrels and getting smashed through tables. So why should I believe that Cody would have a difficult time beating this guy? I mean, there's suspension to disbelief, and then they're just outright mocking my intelligence. And I'm sorry. But with where he is at right now in his current character development, I do not buy Darby Allin having overly competitive matches with Chris Jericho, regardless of what story you're trying to tell. So yeah, this whole thing was really ineffective for me. And maybe you do this match in a year and a half down the road when Darby Allin's more established, then I might buy Jericho having difficulty beating him. But right now, all this did was make Jericho look like a weak, crappy champion, and it made the Cody Jericho title match less believable by association. Sue me if you think I'm wrong, but that's what I got out of this. All right, let's move on to NXT from October 16th, 2019. Tommaso Ciampa versus Angel Garza. So if you recall from last week, this match was set up because Garza confronted Ciampa backstage, rambled to him about something in Spanish, and then Ciampa just sucker punched the dude and left him laying. So this week they have a match, and, well, it's just a match. And, of course, because it's WWE, they have to let the job guy get in a bit of offense. They did some stuff for a few minutes. Garza did the gimmick where he yanks his pants off in the middle of the match. Ciampa eventually hit the big running kick to Garza in the corner. He then proceeded to wrestle Garza's pants and hit a running knee to them in the corner. And then he chucked the pants at Garza on the apron and planted him with a DDT for the pin. And then afterwards, the Undisputed Era came out. Roddy was conspicuously wearing Velveteen Dream's shades. He also had his shirt torn, so something was clearly up. And, well, the Undisputed Era just circled around the ring. Kyle O'Reilly tossed a flash drive to Morrow, and then they left. That was also Tommaso Ciampa's big ring return after being out for 6 months. And by God, what a very quick recovery from neck surgery that guy had. Anyway, as it turns out, the video was just footage of Cole, Strong, and O'Reilly hovering over the dead carcass of Velveteen Dream, saying that anyone that gets in their way gets beat down. Yes, that was the big reveal that was worth waiting through the commercial break to see. Underwhelming, to say the very least. Danny Burch and Oney Lorcan versus Fabian Eichner and Marcel Bartel. After skimming through my notes very briefly, here's what I will say about this match. These four men worked very hard for a match that no one had any rhyme or reason to care about. Burch and Lorcan are just prime examples of workhorse machines that always go the extra mile. They're actually, in a lot of ways, exactly like the Revival. They're two generic mean brawlers that everybody loves because they know that when they see them in a match, they're going to work their butts off. So they had a fun tag match with the Imperium guys working over Burch and Lorcan for a while. Lorcan got the hot tag and practically killed himself doing a bunch of dives to the outside. It's so funny because, and I gotta say this, just to demonstrate how ridiculous this business can be at times. If you ever watch a normal guy do a flip dive or a suicide tope to someone on the outside, it'll usually look really graceful. The wrestler will stick the landing, shall we say. I watch Oney Lorcan do these dives, and not a single one of them looks graceful by any stretch. When Oney does a dive, he just goes, I'm going to leap into the air as high as I can and just let gravity do the work. And it's awesome because everyone loves it. They could care less whether or not Oney leaps over the top rope and hits a perfect landing dive onto the other guy. They just want to see dudes land on each other. It's so awesome. Now, with that all said, I had one complaint about this match that I didn't like. There's a spot toward the end where Eichner, I think it was, hits this amazing-looking double springboard moonsault on the Burch. It was a perfect move to do a finish with because the crowd went nuts for it and it looked awesome. Unfortunately, Burch just kicked out and they wrestled for a few more minutes. So that part I didn't like. I thought that should have been the finish. Obviously, though, the story here is that while Imperium is great and the faction is awesome, the bottom line is that there is one guy that matters in that group, and it's Walter. Everyone else is either a punching bag or a background player. So unfortunately, they had to once again lose here. I don't really understand that mentality. I mean, I think you could easily make Eichner and Martel title contenders if you're willing to build them up. But for whatever reason, their primary focus is Walter. Everyone else in the group be damned, basically. We had a Johnny Gargano video package. It was basically just designed to let you know that Gargano is the heart and soul of NXT and whatnot. And he has apparently been so much of the heart and soul of this brand that he's had one match with Shane Thorne, of all people, over the last few weeks. And that's all he's done since the fallout to his feud with Adam Cole. He has no ongoing program, no upcoming matches. He's just a guy that pops in once in a while to remind people that he exists. This was then followed by an interview where Kathy asks Gargano how he feels about Ciampa returning. And, Gargano basically says that he's really not sure what to make of it. And to be quite frank, neither am I. Io Shirai versus Kayden Carter. Just a short squash match to put Io over. Io won with a moonsault. I will at least credit them for having Io control most of the offense as to not have her sell long-term for Kayden Carter, of all people. If I had one gripe about it, it would be this. One of the things that I appreciated about the Candice-Io match from the pay-per-view was that Io did not use the patented moonsault to win matches, because she's a heel now. Instead, she beat Candice with a submission, and it was great. For some reason, she's back to using the moonsault as her finisher, and I have no idea why. If she's going to be a heel, she's got to act like a heel. And I don't like the idea of seeing her use any of her babyface moves, especially as finishers. Particularly because you know the crowd is going to go ballistic for Io hitting high-risk moves. So why would you even put yourself in that position for her to get even more cheered than she is right now? Just have her tease the moonsault, don't deliver it, and have her do some kind of submission hold to get the win. Heat, people. Heat. Anyway, Io did a promo afterwards. She staked her claim for getting a title shot. She said not Rhea and not Bianca. And even the mentioning of the name Rhea brought her out to confront Io. She said that she's going to put Bianca in her place next week. And if Io ever mentions Rhea's name in passing again, Rhea's going to leave her for dead, essentially. And tell you what, if I were Io here, I surely would not mention Rhea's name ever again. If I were physically confronted and verbally threatened by Rhea Ripley at any point in time, I would say, yes ma'am, it will not happen again. Because I know Rhea would kick my teeth down my throat, and probably leave me for dead. We had a Boa promo in Chinese. Guess they thought the American TV audience would comprehend what he said. They didn't. Perhaps subtitles would have been helpful. William Regal had an interview with Kathy. He said that Dream was unable to compete for the North American title due to the Undisputed Era beatdown. Therefore, it has been set that the winner of the Keith Lee-Dominik Dijakovic match will take on Roddy for the belt next week. And then we get Keith Lee versus Dominik Dijakovic, with the winner facing Roderick Strong for the NXT North American title next week. So, I guess it would be safe to say that it's impossible for these two to have a bad match. And while I cannot say that this is my favorite of the series so far, this one definitely told a much better story than the last couple. Most Keith Dominik matches in NXT thus far have been, let's just do a bunch of crazy big man athletic moves to pop the crowd. This one was, let's do some athletic moves, but actually bother to have one guy sell a body limp for a good chunk of it to make it look more believable. They do a spot right out of the gate where they're hitting the ropes and trying to take each other down with shoulder tackles. But the story here was that because both men are huge, jacked up brick walls of human flesh, Dominik actually hurt his left arm and elbow trying to hit Keith Lee with a shoulder tackle. And Keith Lee, the genius worker that he is, worked it over to continue to injure it. By the way, note to everyone who considers themselves advocates of story consistency, you want a prime model for how you sell a body part? Watch Dominik Dijakovic in this match. There was not a single offensive move that this guy utilized where he completely discounted his left arm in order to execute something flashy. They had a cool moment where Dominik struggled to power up Keith for a choke slam because his left arm was too hurt. So instead he just hoisted up Keith with his right arm and dropped him down for a near fall. They had this great spot toward the end where Keith tried to hit a vertical suplex on Dominik, but instead of just doing the normal deal where they land back down on their feet and try to hoist the other guy over, Keith actually held a grip onto Dominik and finally was able to hoist him over. Everyone went nuts for that. They had a moment where Dominik had Keith in the corner and tried to hit his feast your eyes burning hammer, but again, because Dominik is a smart worker and his left arm was hurt in this match, he did not actually execute the move, so instead he just tried to hit an electric chair, but Keith reversed it into a poison rana, and eventually both men went up top again, but this time Roddy ran down for the DQ, and Regal immediately without hesitation gets up from the balcony area and informs Roddy that he will now defend his title against both Keith Lee and Dominik Dijakovic in a three-way next week. And there's actually an unintentionally comical moment later on where they show the graphic for this match, and you just see these two big, beefy dudes standing on the outskirts of the tiny North American champion Roderick Strong. So, basically the story they'll probably tell next week is Keith and Dominik are just going to throw around Roddy for a while until Roddy miraculously steals a pin and wins. It's a WWE three-way. What other finish do you think they'd come up with? Matt Riddle versus Bronson Reed. I don't know if you've ever noticed this or not, people. Matt Riddle is very strong. There's a point where Riddle hit the bro to sleep, followed by a powerbomb, followed by a knee strike to the face. And when you see Riddle do these moves in succession to a normal man, you'd probably think that it's impressive. Riddle doing this to a 300-pound-plus guy is beyond impeccable. Anyway, Riddle won with a bro Derek, which is basically the reverse Styles Clash from a tombstone position. Kind of like the cross armbar finish better, but it is what it is. We had a hype promo for Bianca Belair throwing her hat into the title picture. She's just training and working hard and staking her claim as to why she should be the next challenger. And while I still do not believe that Bianca is worthy to challenge Shayna since she's already lost twice to her, I still think Bianca's an incredible promo and definitely an underutilized talent in NXT. Ty Nara versus Tegan Nox. Tegan Nox's first match back since her ACL tear. She comes out wearing comically humongous knee braces, and they have a very short squash match deal. I wrote down almost nothing about it. Tegan won with a move they now coin the Shiniest Wizard. Very cringeworthy. And then after the bell, Dakota Kai comes down to give her a hug. She's about to be interviewed when Shayna, Jessamyn, and Marina come out to confront them both. Shayna proceeds to cut a fantastic heel promo on Tegan. Says she probably doesn't want to throw herself into the fire with getting in the ring with Shayna. She can ask Dakota what it's like to be in the ring with her. She says Tegan is running out of limbs to rehab. And after Tegan tells Shayna to give her a title shot so she can prove herself, Shayna just tells her she hasn't earned it and call her when she's done something noteworthy. Awesome. There is a wretched 20-second skit where Damian Priest is either being admired or perhaps sexually aroused before his match later on. I don't really know. All I know is that one girl looked like she had no idea how to react to any of it, and quite frankly, I didn't either. I have no idea what this Punishment Martinez gimmick is. I have no clue what I'm supposed to make of him. It would seem that he is some kind of New York street pimp, although I'm not really sure how this would fly in WWE if they ever revealed this to the public. So, suffice it to say, this is very baffling. Also very baffling, whatever the hell this Finn Balor promo package was. What I really didn't like about it, though, was that they spent the entire night hyping this up as a Finn Balor special message, which gave me the indication that he was going to come out and do a promo or something, and maybe set up a program with someone down the road. But no. Instead, he does this verbiage about having to go back to his roots to find himself, and that was it. He didn't cut a promo in the building. He wasn't there to do an interview or anything. It was well, it was false advertising is what it was. I look at it this way. If you're going to label something as a special message, you can't just air a minute-long video package of a word salad promo and expect us to care. If all it was going to amount to was a thrown-together video package, at least label it as a Finn Balor special package. Don't sit there and get people's hopes up that they're going to hear from Finn Balor live, only to not deliver it. This is the one thing on the show that I legitimately got angry about. Boa versus Killian Dane. So, Boa got in a quick fire of offense. Dane killed him with a cross-check on the outside. They laid on the mat for a minute or two. Dane hit a series of Vader bombs followed by a modified camel clutch submission. And, well, that was it. What was the purpose of this? To remind us that Killian Dane is a big mean guy who beats up people? Okay. And then Pete Dunne versus Damian Priest in the main event. Oh, and by the way, before I forget this, they did a deal during Pete's entrance where Dane confronted him and Pete snapped his fingers. I can only presume that this is their genius way of diving into the next program. And if this is really their lazy way of writing into a Pete Dunne Killian Dane program down the road, I pity these writers for their lack of creativity. Anyway, I did think the match was really good. The one thing I've constantly been nagging about with Damian Priest for a long time is that he's never had one signature program since he debuted. His entire NXT run has been devoted to short squash matches and shooting invisible arrows at the Jumbotron, and having really cool theme music. So I was very happy when they set this program up with Priest and Dunne for the show. And I thought they had a really nice match. I liked a lot of the stuff they did. There was a cool-looking somersault senton that Damian did at one point, which looked really impressive. I've actually seen both him and Luchasaurus hit the same move, and both times it's gotten massive pops from the crowd. I particularly like the stuff at the end where they just had a shoot UFC fist fight to try and knock each other on the ground. Crowd really liked that too. And eventually they fight into the corner. They barricade the ref. She tries to squeeze her way out before she gets crushed by these two behemoths. And Damian, upon seeing that the ref was temporarily distracted, kicks Pete in the testicles, hits a crossroads deal, and wins the match. And whereas normally I would hate the idea of them doing some kind of screw job finish in a match that really doesn't need it, this screw job finish actually made sense in the context of the story they were telling. The idea was that Damian is undefeated in NXT. This is his toughest task to date. And upon realizing that Damian was incapable of beating Pete Dunne clean, like he's done in every single one of his matches thus far, Damian had to go low to get the cheap win, and that's the way they furthered the program. So I was okay with this. And that was NXT for week 3. Overall, I would say that the show was good. I definitely enjoyed it more than Dynamite, although I'm still not going to overlook the same problem that AEW has right now because NXT is doing the exact same thing. I'm cool with them having a lot of matches on TV every week. If you space out 4 or 5 matches on a TV show and present them all differently, I think it can be great. What I'm not fine with is having 7 or 8 matches every week and not breaking up the monotony with promo or story packages. I need to see more character development on both AEW and NXT right now. And it's just, right now there's too much focus on trying to get guys over with moves. And they're not focusing enough on personality traits. I need to know what the backstory is for guys like Damian Priest and all these other talents they're trying to establish. I need to know why I should care about guys like Darby Allin and some of your less established, recognizable talent. You're not going to be able to just throw out guys cold anymore and expect them to get over without providing any backstory. And unfortunately for AEW, because NXT's been around longer and I've seen a lot of development of the characters and talents they have right now, it is a much steeper grind for AEW to climb. And while some people might think you can get guys over by just putting them out in the ring and letting them do their magic, maybe the hardcore marks might think that way. You know, maybe if we're watching an indie show or something like that in front of 400 people, yeah, you'll probably get guys over by just having them do moves. But if you're trying to build an audience and establish a base with your network, you need more than just matches. You're not working indie date shows on Saturday nights in front of 300 people in a bar. You are on national TV now. You can't have this indie mentality of your booking. And right now, from 3 weeks of watching both NXT and AEW, I'm seeing a lot of emphasis on matches and ring work, and I'm not seeing a lot of focus on the other important aspects of pro wrestling. And if both brands continue along this path they're going right now, it's not going to end well for either party involved. I promise you that. Like I said, I like the matches they're doing. I really don't have anything to complain about with them. There's minor nitpicks that I could break apart, but on general principle, the matches are fine. But I need more than that. This is not sustainable long term to book the way they're booking right now. So hopefully things change in the future. The ultimate question is which company will realize this first and take advantage of it. I think that will be the determining factor here of which show will be the more successful. With that said, everyone, that'll do it for this edition of the review series. If you have not done so already, subscribe, rate, and comment so that you can keep up to date with all future FSWR content. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll be back on Monday for another news installment of the 5 Starr Wrestling Report.